health and wellness. And then there are a lot of other things that have happened to me that have what I call grace. Amazing people that I've met, many of whom are right here. I mean, Foster and Hermie Klein I met when Foster was still a resident in psychiatry and I was a public health nurse in my first year. So we go back 40 years, Les, 20 years. The fact that the Nordstrom family, which is an extraordinary family, and that's really the family I want to honor in great, great gratitude tonight. Elmer and Kitty, I mean, just think about what the chances are of having an amazing family like that buy the property that I'm trying to start a project, and Kitty got it. And one of the stories we're going to talk about tonight is, Lou's going to read a story that really talks about the Nordstroms. And then also to have been blessed with the Gates family being neighbors and getting to know the Gates, and then we'll talk a little bit later about Bill and Linda Foundation, which helped us so much as well. Just grace everywhere. And what I realized, though, and I say this all the time, is that when I had a dream about a center, a wellness center, which was in the early 70s, the sense that came to me was to be part of the creation. It was actually, I was on a train in Europe, and I just had an astoundingly beautiful time visiting my grandfather's home in Switzerland, and I just was in such a sense of gratitude. So I was awake all night on this train ride and sort of rocking. And now I look back and I realize it was probably a meditation. I just didn't know what to call it at the time. But I got off that train and I had this felt sense of what I was supposed to do with my life, which was to be part of the creation of an educational, recreational, therapeutic community. It was not go out and do this thing, Gretchen. It was be part of the creation. So I really feel tonight is important to also acknowledge so many of you that have been part of it, and starting with the Harmony Hill board and the Harmony Hill staff and all of our volunteers. And I think if I had you raise your hand, it'd be about half of this group, or at least a third. So thank you, board, staff, and volunteers. Couldn't do it without you. So the other really recently astounding thing that has happened is this book. And I found a quote, I'd never heard of this woman before, but it says, "To be astonished is one of the surest ways of not growing old too quickly." To be astonished is one of the surest ways of not growing old too quickly. And it's written by a woman that has a book called Age Doesn't Matter Unless You're Cheese. I think that would be interesting. So we have a couple of the volunteers that have been, like the last couple of years, have just given heart and soul, actually thousands of hours, and that's the authors of this new book, is Donna Cameron and Chris Leathers, and I wonder if you could stand, because they are really... all kinds of my stories, and even I got one of those dragons that you would speak of. And usually I was talking too fast for the dragon to catch up. But Donna and Chris went out and interviewed over 60 people and spent of their own time and money. They totally donated thousands of hours, and I just thank you so much. So this book is going to be part of the real continuing story. Every time we have a cancer retreat, I think, oh, there's 5 more stories. So there may be future volumes. But what I wanted to do tonight is to introduce you to a few people that will tell you a little excerpts from some of the stories. I'm going to start with Lou Farber, who's the past board president, who's one of our faculty, and she's going to read a story that is, the title is Friends Indeed. And I'll tell you right now, one of the people that is in this story is my beloved neighbor, Jean Moore. Jean Moore is loved by everyone who ever comes on this hill. And Jean and her friends created the FIs, the Fiercely Independent Elders. They're not very fierce, but they are fierce about their independence. And her motto for living is Carpe Diem, and she lives by it, seize the day. And I thought when I came out here, if I can be around people like that who live that life, I want to stay here. So,
Gretchen, is there a way we can get a better sound system? I do not hear half.
Okay, we'll have to use this thing. Thanks, Hilka. See if we can do better.
We're going to hold these and read at the same time. All right, is that helpful?
Okay.
So this story is Friends Indeed. It's the beginning of Gretchen's journey out here. And this is just an excerpt. There's a lot more rich detail, so I invite you to enjoy it in the book. These are in Gretchen's words. During the year I stayed at St. Andrews, I found myself settling into the land and surrendering to life in a way that felt almost preordained. Returning to the basics, the earth, the land, the water, it felt like I was returning to myself. When the opportunity to become caretaker of the property next door arose, I was ready. It was 1986. The property had belonged to the Callison family for many years. When Mrs. Callison died, her family put it up for sale, and locals worried that the property would be broken into parcels or sold to become a mobile home park. In exchange for caretaking the large, nearly empty house, I paid a rent of $50 a month. Shortly after I settled in, I felt my roots starting to take hold, and that would be the house down there. I knew I wanted to lease the property, but I couldn't be certain that the wellness center I envisioned would thrive in this small community. I needn't have worried. Neighbors were not only supportive, they contributed countless ideas and hours to make the dream a reality. Retired Professor Elaine Cook, who lived just down the road, enthusiastically jumped in to help with the garden and the kitchen, and ultimately joined our board of directors. She and neighbor Jean Moore reviewed my grant applications and early marketing pieces and critiqued them with the candor and gentleness of guardian angels. What a lesson in guidance I learned early on from these remarkable and gracious women. If I had any more doubts, they were put to rest after talking with Andy Bell, a good friend of my neighbor Gail Corey. Andy, a quadriplegic since a diving accident when he was in college, was committed to wellness. He saw the house as a place for small group retreats, such as getaways for himself and others in wheelchairs. He expressed his commitment to Harmony House, as we originally called it, a place of congruence and wellness. Andy later agreed to chair the first board of directors. In 1988, I received a letter informing me that the property had been sold. The purchasers were Kitty and Elmer Nordstrom. The Nordstrom family had long owned property in Union, to which the whole family retreated for vacations and special occasions. I had no idea what this new circumstance would mean for Harmony House. I sat down and wrote a detailed letter to Mr. and Mrs. Nordstrom describing my dreams for Harmony House. With trepidation, I put it in the mail and waited. As weeks turned into months and there was no response, I started to wonder if I should have written such a long letter to my new landlord. It was a couple of months later, just as I was leaving for work one morning, that I answered the phone to hear, "This is Mr. Nordstrom. Mrs. Nordstrom and I will be out this morning and would like to meet with you." I called Tacoma Community College, where I was teaching, and told them there was no way I could come to work today. A cluster of nerves, I went out and picked a huge bouquet of flowers, which I would like to say is your trademark, for Mrs. Nordstrom, and then I baked bread, thinking the fragrance of the bread would be a welcome conversation starter. I invited my neighbor, Gail Forey, over to join me when the Nordstroms came. Gail knew Kitty, and the two of them chatted in a corner of the living room while Mr. Nordstrom and I sat by the window. His legendary business prowess was evident as he patiently and thoroughly grilled me. Who was our attorney? Who was our fiscal agent? How did we plan to raise money? Had we secured our 501c3 tax exemption from the IRS? When did we think we would get it? And what exactly were our plans for the house? Mr. and Mrs. Nordstrom left that afternoon with fresh flowers and freshly baked bread. Mr. Nordstrom said he wanted to meet with me again when we had received our tax exemption, adding that if we had any troubles with it, I should call him because he had someone at the store who was both a CPA and an attorney and could surely help us. I made arrangements a few weeks later to meet with the Nordstroms again, with Harmony House Board President Andy Bell. Just as we were getting ready to leave for the meeting, my beeper went off. I had joined the Union Volunteer Fire Department and was often the only medical professional to respond to aid calls. I sent